That was insane. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
Bro.
Fuck yeah.
That was awesome. And already he's coming in with bars, and it's hard to even understand what the fuck he's saying,
And
bro.
That was a clip from our live album reaction to Lupe Fiasco's Drill Music in Zion, his 8th studio album. And this has been one of the most anticipated releases in the entire hip-hop field for this entire year, and it was cool to go through with the entire community. So if you guys want to actually catch our full live reaction to the album, link available in our description, and let us know how you guys feel about the album in the comments below. But let's get into this review, bro, because we've been talking about this release for a long time. We didn't even listen to the singles before going into the album because we wanted that fresh experience. And now that we have it, let's jump right into the artist performance. What did you think of it, bro?
Well, first of all, I think Lupe is just in a different zone, man. And I feel as if I say that with every single Lupe album that drops, either if it's Tetsu or, Food and Liquor. Like, you just understand that Lupe is on a level beyond everyone when it comes to the way that he's performing a lot of his verses. And what's cool about this Lupe album, in contrast to other ones, is I feel as if maybe the writing was a bit less complicated, but still, like, there's so much to unpack. And I feel like that's like amazing for me as a listener, because I'm able to connect to a lot of different things that he's saying, that he's presenting. Whereas if maybe with other albums, I'd have to take a magnifying glass. I still have to with this album, but
it's a nice balance, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a nicer balance. And I also feel as if when you go into Drill Music in Zion, you could feel the pressure that, Lupe has on his shoulders, where he wants to talk about a lot of things that are bothering him, especially about drill music, especially about the current state of rap, and he puts a lot of emotion and emphasis within a lot of these verses, and I think it's fantastic. Like, even going on to something like Autoboto verse 1 was fantastic. The verse on Gotti was fantastic. Kiosk, Miss Mural, that was an incredible performance, and a lot of these different songs too, you're not even getting hooks, so the song structures were different than, let's say, what you would get on other Lupe albums, but it allowed you to get deeper into the track list.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about his performance, and why do you think you could probably not even find a flaw within it at all?
Well, it's just because lyrically nobody's fucking with Lupe. Like, he's the best rapper of the year in terms of just bars, and I think that, like, really his lyrical dexterity is something to marvel at, and I feel like every line leaves you speechless, where you're kind of thinking, like, what the fuck did he just rap?
And not only that, but it's the way he performs them, right?
Yeah, wide range of vocabulary showcased all throughout. And I think that, like, he's just kind of this modern philosopher within hip-hop, because he's really, like, examining the world around him. And, he's doing it in such a poetic way, too, kind of the same way that Chuck D and Tupac did back in their day. So it's cool to kind of see the way that he's also able to shift perspectives, give different points of views on songs, and really just also give the listener an experience that's going to be challenging for them. I like that he knows that his listeners are very intellectual, and he's kind of playing into that, and he's not going to dumb down his lyrics for anybody. And I think that for someone who's never heard a Lupe album before, it might be an overwhelming experience, but with repeated listens, you're really going to get to see what he's able to do. And I think in terms of his performances, the cadences are transformative. I think the flows and deliveries are always focused and always concentrated from song to song. I think that there's always confidence beaming throughout, and I also like the fact that he'll switch up his voice on certain songs. For example, on a song like Kiosk, for the first 2 verses, when he's rapping from that perspective of that jewelry seller, he's kind of talking through a vocoder, and there's this distortion on his vocals. Or a song like Naomi, where he's kind of giving you this Italian accent just to kind of be playful a little bit. So I like how versatile he was in that front, and to me, this is a perfect performance. There wasn't a single weak line on this entire album.
Not only that, but what's interesting about this album is that apparently he completed it within 72 hours, and that's fucking impressive for how much he was able to fit into a 10-song album. And we're going to talk more about the content in this next category that's coming up. But what I love about his performance too is that nothing felt overbearing, and that's a thing that I've liked from a lot of albums this year, and Lupe delivered on that. Like, there's so much knowledge that's being put through this track list, and it's digestible. It's not even 45 minutes long.
Is there any flaws or nitpicks with the performance
Honestly,
at all for you?
not even. Like, we were having a discussion about the hooks where, maybe they're not the most memorable, but even at that, like, is that really a knock? Because he's delivering you, like, fucking verses that, come straight out of the Book of Eli. So, I mean,
I know.
It's not even nitpick at this point.
Yeah, it's not, like, necessary for a song to be good to have a crazy hook, but I think that that's something that Lupe's never really been the strongest in, but it's not really needed here.
But I think that there were strong hooks on this. Like,
Autoboto was really solid.
Even Gotti was really solid as well. So, I mean, like, was it on Gotti? Hold on, let me just pull up this Genius thing. I believe it was. No, it was not on Gotti. Those were only 2 verses. I believe it was goes on. I'd have to go back to it and go
Only
through
other
again.
thing that I would say as a nitpick, and like I wouldn't even knock down any points for this, but I feel like in terms of verbosity, it sounds sometimes like he's trying to maybe fit in too many words, and it kind of breaks the fluidity of a flow on songs like Miss Mural or Precious Things, but it's still excellence at the end of the day. It's nothing that's going to knock down any points for me. So it's definitely perfect performance. But let's get into the content, because I think content-wise, this is the best album of the year.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing how we had the spoken word intro by Ayesha, which is his sister. And she kind of foreshadows what this album is going to have in store for you, talking about how so many young people are dropping baseball gats to pick up gats. And she's also talking about how the elite are ravaging these communities and exploiting them for their natural resources. And she's also speaking about how there's kind of this disconnect between people's morals and their actions. So it was cool to see her kind of foreshadow that at the beginning. And let me ask you, what did you pick up out of the themes from the album?
Well, as far as themes go, I feel as if Lupe's look kind of observing society and kind of nitpicking everything that he feels as if kind of like is counterintuitive to what people are doing. So example, in certain tracks in the track list, you'll talk about how rappers wear these jewelry, like big chains and earrings, and they'll be very flashy with themselves, but how that doesn't help advance their soul or their knowledge. Or, even in certain instances where, let's say, I believe it's on Phonem, just to get his point across, he'll use only 2 lines for one verse. Rappers die too much. That's it. That's the verse.
And he gives a moment of silence.
Exactly.
After.
And then in the second verse, he then explains how he wanted to make sure that you were reflecting within that first verse, because he didn't want to overcomplicate it. Not only that, but let's say, you have certain verses where Lupe is observing the faulty mindset of society. So Gotti verse 1, mistaking maidens, excuse me, it's so complicated. Mistaking maidens for manatees. Neuralink is now pairing all your fantasies. Mistaking the sensation for sanity. My mistake, I'm mistaking staying for cannot leave. And what's interesting about this verse is that Lupe is kind of telling people, like, you guys have gotten so tapped in with technology and you guys are going so far with this mentality that you guys are no longer in reality and you don't understand what's really happening in front of you. And I think that's a big prominent theme without the track list, at least for me.
Absolutely. And yeah, there's so many songs where the concepts and the topics are so genius. For example, on Precious Things, he is rapping from the point of view of his hands, which is genius. Like you were saying, I love Kiosk because there's a line where he says, diamonds only worth what you are willing to pay, a deceptive game you are killing to play. And he's talking about how the consumer who's buying these jewels, it plays a role into this transactional system where, the whole jewelry trade is ran by child labor. And it's very kind of fucked up to see how the elite and these governments are making profit off of child labor, and how they're fucking up developing countries.
Absolutely.
That way.
Not only that,
mean?
but from like a pure hip hop standpoint, you're still getting these super complex rhyme schemes. So this is on Autoboto verse 2. Listen to this rhyme scheme. Now I don't even know who wrote those. Maybe my ghost knows, but we both cold. I done used to write all my ghost flows, wrote each other solos. Now thus say he want the co-pros, money from the show, and rights to the logo. Do you want a lawyer? No ho. And what's interesting about this rhyme scheme as well is Lupe is also taking you to his personal, to like his alter ego that he has, which is Carrera. And he's saying that I have a ghostwriter, but it's myself. It's my alter ego, just explaining how advanced he is with his lyrics. And you're going to get all kinds of rhyme schemes like this sprinkled throughout the track list. I could spend maybe 3 hours fucking reading out these lyrics and going through it. And I'm sure there's so much shit that's gone over my head. But let's talk about Miss Mural, man. So completed the trilogy. He's gotten it done. Legendary series within hip-hop songs for rap music. What have you taken out of it so far after your couple listens? Because it's extremely complicated.
It's very dense.
Yes, it is.
And yeah, the whole time there's kind of this conversation going on between an artist and a patron, someone that's willing to pay for the art. And I kind of picked up on the metaphor of Lupe being a rapper in the industry and that patron being the head of a record label.
Oh, that's smart.
And the way that, because in the verse he's saying how, things are going at the rate of trends. And if you're not following these trends, you're going to kind of fall behind. But he would rather tear everything apart and make the listener evolve with his thought processes instead of running with these trends. And by the end of it, what's cool is that he lights up a pile of scrapped art that he had on the side, and he makes a patron stand on top of the art. He's like, I've just had creative inspiration, stand on top of this pile, and he burns it up. He, sprinkles gasoline all over it, lights it up, and that's kind of representative of Lupe going independent because he was locked into a deal with Atlantic Records. And that was, I feel like, him burning down all those pressures of living up to a label and him kind of being free of all that. And lyrically, he's painting a fucking picture with his words. And
like he always does.
Like he always does with the Mural series. And it was fucking genius. Another song that's really good is Drill Music in Zion. I love on the second verse.
Best song on the album for me.
For you, really?
Best song
I
on the
love
album.
how he's talking about someone that was falsely accused of murder and how he is fucking so angry that this other person is living life freely.
And you know what's interesting about that performance as well, just diving into it, I feel as if when you go into it, that subtle jazz production kind of creates like this relaxed mellow tone. But once you get to the Lupe verses and you get into the writing, you realize how fucked up it is. And you realize, what type of emotional state he's in. So content perfect, guys. Listen,
Easy
two
money.
for two, guys. Listen, we don't give away
the
perfect
scores
rating
lightly.
We don't do it lightly, but listen, this is a Lupe Fiasco album, and the content was perfect. But let's go on to the features because it's not feature driven. The track list is not like that. But Nayirah had 2 features on Autoboto and then Precious Things, and then of course Lupe's sister had the intro for the Lion's Den. So I believe on Autoboto, Nayirah has a chorus, and then after that she has an outro on, I believe it is Precious Things, if I'm not mistaken. No,
other way around.
Chorus, other way around. Chorus on Precious Things, and then after that, the outro
Autoboto.
on
She
Autoboto.
also does a rendition of Lupe's hook, and that was really solid. I love how delicate her vocals are, but how epic they feel. It sounds like it's part of like this opera show, just because of how full her vocals are. Apart from that, Ayesha had a great spoken word intro like she's had on albums like The Cool and Food and Liquor. So that was cool to see her come back around and support her brother that way. But the thing about this track list is that there's no real highlighting of the features. They're kind of background. They're not really necessary to the track list. Well, no, they are necessary to the track list, but I feel like you didn't really need any other features or any rappers spitting bars because realistically speaking, who the fuck could keep up with him on this album?
No, absolutely not. Not only that,
he
but
would have bodied whoever came on the album.
For sure. And another big thing about the track list too is like, would you want guest verses, taking away from Lupe's writing? Like that's what I'm seeing is that every bar and every verse is so valuable to this track list that let's say you would have had these top tier lyricists come and play, they still wouldn't have been up to par with the verses that Lupe was laying down on here. And even, just being able to add Nayirah and his sister to the track list, that adds this subtle, gentle touch to the heavy lyricism that you're going to be getting.
Absolutely.
So I think the features were amazing. They did their part. It added to the track list, and I really fucked with it. But let's go on to the production. So everything was taken care of by Lupe, and soundtrack, that's his main producer.
Yeah.
He's been doing his albums forever, and there's this beautiful jazzy undertone throughout the whole track list that keeps you engaged. You feel like you're listening to this classic boom bap album with these modern touches where they'll add either synths on outros or they'll add certain vocal effects throughout Lupe's verses. So how did you feel about that? And I think one knock for some people is the engineering on this album. Did you find anything like that whatsoever?
Engineering was great for me. I didn't see any problems.
In my mixing
or
headphones, it was really good.
I love just subtle touches. Like I believe it was on either Drill Music on Zion or it was on the outro on Phonem where you had the sound panning from left to right. All those creative choices were really well done, and this is a beautiful soundscape. I mean, it's not avant-garde or anything. It's not, something that's innovative, but I still like how bluesy the jazz is here because it kind of amplifies the hopelessness of Lupe's lyrics because, it's not like uplifting jazz. It's kind of really more somber. Apart from that, some standouts for me production-wise would be on Gaudi, where you get, Gaudi, which is also pronounced fish, apparently, where you get the string arrangement with these trumpets that sound like the same trumpets that were used on For Your Eyes Only by J. Cole. I don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah, so
also,
sick.
One of my favorite beats was also on Autoboto, where it was more trap influence, but you had kind of these beautiful twanging mandolin strings. That was kind of cool to see a modernized jazz beat.
Drill Music in Zion was such a well-done production. I love the jazzy influence. And you're going into that song, like the production's going to ride out a bit, and it kind of already gets you into the mood of what's to come. And one of the big things with this album, and I say this for a lot of lyricists that go and create track lists, you don't want to have this extravagant production like, let's say, you'd find on a Donda or on a Don FM. It just doesn't make sense. You know what I'm trying to say? Because you need Lupe's voice to be free. A lot of these tracks too, they feel like there's breathing room, like there wasn't too much going on as far as, like, let's say compositions go, but you needed that because let's say these beats were going to be super fucking layered, super complicated, and you wouldn't have been able to get through to the Lupe verses. What's the point of the track list? And I think that was achieved as far as a goal goes goes with the overall listen for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the production is amazing. There was really no
There's no
missteps
flaws, yeah.
within it. And yeah, I think that soundtrack did a great job of putting Lupe in his comfort zone. And that was great to see the verbal attacks that he went on to have song per song. But let's get into the replay value, because I feel like this is going to be maybe a bit of a controversial conversation for some people, because when albums are this heavy and this dense and have lyrics that are so forward thinking and so hard to kind of
Grasp.
decrypt, I would say,
Yeah.
it becomes hard to kind of give repeat listens. But I've heard the album, I would say, probably 8 times as of right now. And each listen has really made me enjoy the album more and more every single time. And I love the fact that, like you said, there's a balance between surface level lyricism, but also this very complicated lyricism, where I feel like with a Lupe album, you know, it's like fucking swallowing a piece of gum, bro. You don't know when the fuck you're gonna digest it fully. You know what I mean? Like,
I like that analogy.
How the fuck are you gonna fully?
Yeah.
I'm still digesting Tetsuo and Youth,
Bro, for sure.
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
it's gonna take time to like sit with this album, and we were talking about this on the live stream on Patreon, and it's just like he creates timeless music because of the types of messages that he's inserting into these tracks, and I think the production really does add to the accessibility of this album, because if you want to look at it from surface value with these verses, like, no, they shouldn't be as accessible as they are. But I also think that Lupe did a good job at making in-depth quality, you know, writing like he usually does, but making it more accessible for the listener. And I feel as if a lot of rappers are doing that in 2022, where they realize that, okay, there might be a bit of a disconnect for the listener because it's too complicated. But with this, I feel like, you know, if you're a hip-hop stan and like you really fuck with lyricism, you will have a nice time with this. And I feel the same way about that. And as you said, man, I gave this track list so many listens yesterday because, you know, it only clocks in at nearly 40 minutes. So you could listen to this at a really good pace, bro. There's only 10 tracks, and you're gonna have fun with this listen because there's so much to grasp on. And I also think that the fact that Lupe is bringing in so many different subjects in here, even like police brutality, government corruption, the way that he views society, like there's so many different perspectives that you could take from Lupe's that you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to understand all those things before you could actually understand the track list. And like you said, you're still trying to fucking, you know, digest Tetsu. I'm doing the same thing. So where do you see this album falling out of your rotation? I just don't.
Also, only 10 songs, which makes for a great listen too, because it's 40-minute runtime, and to think about how much he packed in that little amount of time is super impressive. So I think the replay value is amazing.
W, for sure.
And I think that the only thing that could have made it go perfect is that maybe to have a couple more memorable hooks, or maybe for it to be not as dense as it was, but I mean, they're nitpicks.
Yeah,
they're
those are
nitpicks. Like,
nitpicks.
this could have easily gone into perfect as well, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be one of my most played albums of the year. But listen, just a fantastic listen. But let's go into our overall thoughts. So I loved what Lupe did here. You know, it was worth the wait. I really love what he did with his 8th studio album. I love how he's presenting you so many different ideologies, but he's kind of doing it in more of a minimalist sort of aspect now, where he's not giving you, let's say, the stuff that you get on Tetsu Youth, but it feels different now. You know, it feels like he's also more focused on this track list, and I love how his pen game is still up to par with his other projects. You know, like, I wanted to go into this album and I wanted to achieve, you know, I wanted Lupe to achieve that, you know, that feeling again of me going into the album where I'm fucking buzzing and I'm trying to find all these Easter eggs.
That first listen was tough, right?
It was tough, man, because you low-key don't understand anything until you go back to Genius and you're on maybe your 8th or 10th listen and you're like, oh, I understand that bar now with my 8th or 10th fucking listen. So I think that was achieved. I love what Soundtrack did with the whole soundscape. I think that was phenomenal. And, you know, just being able to achieve that with 10 songs in a 40-minute runtime is impressive in itself. So that's my overall thoughts, Lou. What do you got, man?
Love the literary devices that Lupe brings through here, from the double entendres through the rhyme schemes, the wordplay, the irony, and certain narratives within the album were all genius. And I think that, to be honest with you, I think this will be one of the most important rap albums of the last decade, just because of the way that he's sort of exposing these inherent flaws within hip-hop music. Because if you're looking at the way that maybe rappers are getting killed because of their flaunting and how that leads to envy, or if you're looking at how rap, hip-hop labels will exploit artists after their passing and profit off of their music after they've left us.
The life insurance
that's
policy part was crazy.
too. And also the fact that so many rappers are torn between the streets and the studio. Lupe doesn't have all the answers, but he has very valuable suggestions to kind of give you.
I love that, yeah.
And I just I love everything that he brought to the table. The messages were amazing, and even just the theme of like the pursuit for profit corrodes the beautiful and pure things that we love and kind of fucks up humanity as a whole. There's so many timeless themes within this album and so much to kind of sit with, and I think that it's a near flawless album. It's one of the best albums of the year, and it's meticulously crafted, which is amazing considering he made this apparently in 3 days.
Yeah, and not only that, but he also did the album cover himself, like he usually does for certain albums. So listen, guys, overall rating, amazing from NFR Podcast. We really did enjoy this listen.
Close to perfect, guys. Probably the closest we've had.
Yeah, we had this discussion, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. I called Lou yesterday night. I'm like, listen, man, I'm looking at it. And he's like, I'm looking at it too. But we ended up going with amazing because, listen, you know, it's tough. It's tough to give that perfect rating. But thank you guys so much for coming into this review. And as we said at the beginning, if you guys want to catch our full live album reaction to Lupe Fiasco's 8th studio album, Jewel Music in Zion, head to the link in our description. It's going to be there for you guys. Thank you so much for watching this, and we'll catch you on the next review.